Hello. Today I'm going to be teaching you about the decade of the 90s because I'm not really that much of a history buff. So naturally, I'm going to do something that was more recent and that I can try to relate to more. So, first thing that I want to tell you about the 90s is the music. Um, the one thing about the 90s in music is we start to see a rise in hip hop and rap music. And I know some documentaries have been made about this, about Ice Cube and Easy E and some of the rising rap and hip hop artists' names that come up as well. A lot of the times, we look back on the 90s, and a lot of the more established, so to say, um, musicians were kind of forgotten, like Bon Jovi. Bon Jovi's a classic. He has a lot of Billboard 100s up there on his name. Vanilla Ice, the one hit wonder, another hip hop name. Um, Another one was Madonna. She's been around for forever, and I think a lot of people think because of how old she was, she kind of does get lost in the 90s. So that was one of the. So that kind of sums it up for the music. Going on to the next part was movies, and this is um, probably one of my favorite things to talk about. We see a lot more sci-fi movies, in my opinion, and some historical movies. Starting out with the Titanic. Titanic was, of course, about the ship that sunk and hit the iceberg that everyone thought it was unsinkable. And then going into the sci-fi part, we see the first part of, or the first movies of the Jurassic Parks. So we have the first Jurassic Park, and about the dinosaur kind of the dinosaur amusement park, so to say, that goes totally wrong. And then, of course, being the big thing in the 90s was in basketball was Michael Jordan. We also have Space Jam, which is probably my favorite movie of the 90s. So, next, we're going to be talking about the art. Um, the big thing that happened in the 90s for me is I always think of the 90s as the riots, the riots in California, and kind of like the turmoil that they were going through. And a lot of people in that era expressed their need through art, and it wasn't through traditional art; it was through graffiti. And graffiti, it was a popular style in urban areas because it gave people a voice, it gave people a platform to express, what they wanted to say and how they wanted to say it. And it could be open to any public and anybody could see it. And I think that's the cool thing about graffiti is that um, you can do it anywhere you want. I mean, as long as, there's no signs that say you can't do it. But I think it was pretty new at that time. So I think anybody could do it anywhere that they wanted, which was kind of cool because it really wasn't hurting anything. And so it could only help out the person that did it as long as it was appropriate and not driving away other businesses. So I thought that was really cool about the art form in the 90s, especially how it grew, so fast and how a lot of people picked it up at the same time. The next thing we're going to talk about um, is the political leader. Um, I think when talking about the U.S., we had to talk about Bill Clinton. Um, I know a lot of people think of him as the I did not have sexual relations with that woman, that kind of thing. But other than that, I mean, he was in office from the early '90s all the way to I, I want to say '96 maybe. Yeah, it was. I'm pretty sure it was '88 to '96. I'm pretty sure. But when talking about that, he got impeached because he lied to the board. But talking about his presidency, he he attempted to negotiate peace in the Middle East and in the ongoing wars occurring in the former Yugoslavia, and then he had a promotion of international action to decrease human created climate change and endorsement of advancing free trade in the Americas. So, I mean, he wasn't he wasn't the worst president in the world, but he wasn't the best, and I think we can say that about a lot of presidents that have come through. But I think the one thing we can judge him on was his intentions, and his intentions were good for the country. So, rather that being said, he was the dominant figure in the 90s politically. The next thing I want to talk about is fashion. Fashion. In my opinion, I feel like fashion these days is starting to come back from the 90s into current trend, especially with teens, especially with people my age and a little bit younger. I have a brother that is a junior in high school, and I feel like I'm always seeing his friends over, and they look exactly like teens from the 90s. I don't know why, but I feel like it is. The grunge look, that was, the whole thing behind the 90s. It was the denims, the tattoo chokers, the voluminous hair, and brown lipstick. I feel like everyone's wanting to have the bigger hair nowadays, and I really feel like the pop culture is being more influenced towards the 90s into now. So that's how I feel about it. The last thing I want to talk about is the one major controversy about the 90s. I'm a baseball fanatic, and so the one thing that I want to talk about, since it is the 90s, was the home run race of the 98 season between Mark McGwire and Sammy Sosa. So the home run record of that year was 61, and in one single season set by Roger Maris back in the early 1950s. And so these two guys are going at it. McGwire broke the record first. He hit 62, and then I'm pretty sure 4 games or 3 games later, Sammy Sosa hit 62 as well. And going into the last week of the season, they were both tied at like 66 home runs. And so the big thing was, who's going to break the record? Well, Sammy Sosa ended up getting only 66, and Mark McGwire ended up getting 69 home runs. But that's not where the controversy ended necessarily. It kind of started at, both these players were taking PEDs, and if you don't know what PEDs are, they are performance enhancing drugs, and so they were punished from baseball. They cannot. The controversy is, if they wouldn't have used PEDs, would they have hit all those home runs? In my opinion, no, they wouldn't have. But at the same time, you can't hit a home run if you can't hit the ball. So PEDs don't help you hit the ball. They help you hit the ball farther. And I think that's where the controversy lies, is if they didn't take them, would they have hit the ball as far as they did? Or did the PEDs have some effect on their ability to hit the ball? I don't think it had any ability on how they hit the ball, but how far they hit the ball. And so I think that's where the controversy lies, and if they should be kept from the Baseball Hall of Fame or not. So you make the decision, and that's all I have for you today. Thank you.